Hi, thank you so much for joining. This is Camille Sams, your Zen lender. And this is the first video. I'm kicking off a new series of conversations. I'm really excited about it. It is called Kitchen Table Talk. And in this series, I am interviewing various different professionals and talking about just those topics that come up around the kitchen table that everyday people are having about real estate and mortgage issues, and just talking through what they mean in practicality. Hopefully, we're answering some of the questions that might come up along with this kitchen table talk. So joining me today is Erica Carter Walden, who is a real estate agent with Compass. And Erica, you may recognize, has been on another series with me about probate, where in her other life, aside from many other hats that she has worn and continues to wear, she was also a probate attorney. So in this conversation, we're going to be talking about renovation loans when purchasing a property. And Erica brings the unique experience of having worked with me on both sides of the transaction. So she has represented the seller as the listing agent, where we came in and we put in an offer, client put in an offer using a renovation loan for the purchase. And then also, she has been on the other side of the aisle representing the buyers submitting an offer for a renovation loan. So very excited to have Erica with me. Thank you so much. And then we have Cortland Jackson, who is a very esteemed and very accomplished contractor. And he comes with years of experience. I've also worked with him on many transactions, many properties, as well as along with one that we did with Erica. So kind of keeping this all in the family, definitely some trusted experience here. So let's go ahead and dive right into our questions. So Erica, I'm going to start with you. So what would you say were your initial concerns when accepting an offer for a renovation loan from a buyer when it was your listing versus the results after the transaction was completed?
So if you've never done this type of transaction, you might think that it's like a really long drawn out construction loan process. Initially, when I first was thinking about accepting the offer, it was a probate. So we had the house needed work. It wasn't a tear down, but it needed some work. And we're looking at investors, and the investors' offers weren't as competitive as people who wanted to move into the property. But we didn't necessarily want to do a FHA loan we couldn't do a VA loan because it wouldn't qualify. So we had all these different options on the table, and the clients or the buyers were very strong. And so it was just really the concern of, okay, well, what is this whole process? Is it going to take us a really long time to get through this whole process? How secure is the loan? Is it, if you have a conventional loan, regular loan, that process. You're like, okay, well, the lender says they have it. We've done the desktop underwriting. All we need is the appraisal, and we can shut the door on this. What is the process? Is there a hiccup? Is there a potential to derail the process because they're going after a renovation loan? And so once we figured out that it really is just a little extra time for the contractor to do the bid, so that they can improve the property after we close, after the seller has their money, after we walked away, buyers own the property. That's when that process happens. Once we establish that it's really the traditional process with a little extra time in there for that evaluation period, then we were comfortable because the buyer was strong on every other. You're going to vet your buyer under any other criteria. You don't want someone who doesn't have enough cash to close. You don't want someone who, all the traditional criteria that you go through as a professional realtor. You're doing that. You're just adding a little bit extra time. So when we laid out all of the cards, this was really the best client because they wanted to live in the property. They wanted to take care of the property. So they were willing to pay a little bit more for it than the investors were. And we knew that the condition of the property prohibited a lot of other buyers. So if that is your scenario, I would definitely say do not be afraid of a renovation loan. It worked out very smoothly.
Thank you. Yeah, and you bring up a couple of good points. The condition of the property itself, I know that you and I talked about it when we were first considering whether or not this offer would be suitable for this type of property. And the property needed work. I remember the floor, there was a portion of the floor that had been torn up. So there were a lot of concerns that if this were a traditional type of loan, that there would be some issues with the appraisal. The lender might not be so comfortable with the as-is condition of the property. And we were able to overcome all of those issues. They were moot points, actually, because we were proposing to fix all of this as a part of the renovation loan. So it wasn't even a factor. I think it's worth noting that the sales price, I think we ended up 625 somewhere thereabouts. And the buyers came, their renovation costs were somewhere around $130,000 worth of work. And the house is beautiful. So, and thanks to Cortland, who came in, he actually worked on that project. You would never know. I remember the house was pink, like everything about the house was pink.
It was very retro. It had been loved for about 60 years. It had good bones and good energy, but it needed a refresh.
It did. And they came in, it was a younger couple, and they came in and they modernized it. White walls and gold fixtures and big open kitchen. They now have an island in the kitchen, and, very in the kitchen, there's a big window, almost floor to ceiling. So the design aspect of it really came through really nicely. So I'll jump over and bring Cortland into the conversation. So from your perspective, Cortland, is it better to do maintenance repairs at the beginning of the purchase when purchasing a property? And when I say maintenance repairs, such as like foundation, or if there's some other, fixtures or systems that need to be updated, like the electrical or plumbing, versus delaying later and risk higher costs to fix this. And the reason, just to kind of put it in perspective a little bit more, as we've talked about this other property that was more beautification, if you will, right? We updated the kitchen, really opened things up, painted, got rid of the pink fixtures. But a lot of times people think about renovation as the beautification of the property. But renovation is also very important. And we've done one of these recently where we just closed on with you, Cortland, that the property needed more foundation work. So what do you think from your perspective? Is it better to try and finance that at the purchase, or have the buyer move into the property and then try and figure out how to do those repairs later?
I would definitely think it would be best to do it in the beginning, because you have the benefit of the resources at your disposal, meaning you have the agents that can help you with understanding repairs that you may not be familiar with as a first-time homeowner. You'll be engaged with the contractor in the beginning, and we can have a discussion about, okay, what is it that you want to do overall with the project? And then sort of what do we need to focus on right now as priorities? And I think to me, it makes the most sense for any homeowner to do all of that in the beginning, because to your point, if you defer particularly foundation work, roof work, mechanical, such as your electrical, your plumbing, your HVAC, you run the risk of what you mentioned earlier. Yes, the prices could be more, but you also run the risk of exacerbating whatever that issue could be. So if there's a foundation issue and you've got some cracking in the foundation, and you don't deal with it, and then we get some tremblers, and then you get even more cracking in the foundation, or that foundation doesn't have anchor bolts, and we have a tremor and the house now slides off of its foundation because it's not bolted down. We haven't had a lot of rain, but if you've got a house that's got, thin roofing, the useful life of the roof is essentially at its end. And if you don't deal with that now, you've done all the beautification inside the house. And then we get one of those, downpours. Right. It's going to expose all of the issues with that roof, which then are going to create problems inside the home. As regards to plumbing, if you have older galvanized plumbing in the home, that could lead to issues with water pressure, wherein your sinks don't give you adequate water. You're not getting the adequate water pressure in your showers. So you've got a new home, but all of the water is coming out in a dribble. Electrical, it's 2022. The amount of technology that we're using is increased the amount of electrical load on the homes. So a lot of older homes are 100 amp panels. You really, once you get into a home, you really should think about upgrading to a 200 amp panel almost immediately so as to ensure that your home has adequate electrical capacity. So for me, it would be about making sure that you look at your foundation. You don't want any issues there. You want to look at your roof. You want to look at your mechanicals. At a minimum, those would be the things that I would encourage any first-time homeowner or any homeowner to seriously consider repairing before you purchase the home, and let those become even further or even more extended deferred maintenance issues that you have to deal with.
Right. Yeah. And it brings up, the points that you're making, because often, these costs can add up. So when I moved into my home, we had, I think, 150 watt box on the house. And so we upgraded to a 200 watt box. And, it wasn't a detrimental cost. I think it was somewhere between $3,500 and maybe $5,000 to do that. But when you're talking about all of these things in totality, it adds up. And often what people do, the alternative to the renovation is either using your own cash. I've had people ask me if they could use a home equity line, but when you're coming into the house at the very beginning, you don't really have much equity built in, especially if you're doing, a minimum down payment, because with these prices that we're dealing with in Southern California or even throughout California, your average house might be $700,000-$800,000. By the time you're done with your down payment and closing costs and moving costs and everything, you could be $50,000-$60,000 in. And now you're talking about trying to get a home equity line. You don't really have that equity in the house to pull out, or you're depleting your cash. Or worse yet, what we've seen is where people use credit cards, and they'll go to the big box stores. They'll go to Home Depot or Lowe's or, somewhere like that. And before you know it, they've spent $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 financing these repairs, or even just putting it on, taking cash advances and putting it on your credit card bill. And then you're trying to come back and refinance that out, or trying to figure out how to pay for those expenses. And often the cost of the interest rates on those credit cards are going to be much higher. They could be 15, 20% on those types of cards to finance it that way, versus maybe if you're doing the renovation, it's only going to add maybe $500 or $600 per month to the payment. So, yeah.
No, I completely agree with your statement. And I think that if a homeowner is dealing with someone like yourself or Erica that can educate them about the repairs that would allow increases in value, to me, those are the things that would make the most sense. So if you've got galvanized plumbing in your home And you talk to Camille and Erica, and they say, hey, if you upgrade to either PEX or copper, well, that'll increase the value. If you've got older conduit or older knob and tube wiring, well, Erica and Camille may say, hey, well, you know what? If you upgrade to Romex, that will increase the value. So if down the line you want to do an equity pool, you've done a few things in the beginning that will have increased the value of the home. So I completely agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, and thank you so much for adding that on, because as I said before, people are always looking at, the kitchen and the bath, to modernize that, but they don't take into account or appreciate how updating the systems in the property, the structure, the backbone, the HVAC system. These are things, adding central air and heat to the property. These are those things that really do add value to the house. And it's not just the walking in and, seeing that, you've got an open floor plan or, modernized bathroom or, master suite or something like that. It really is about shoring up the bones of the property. That also does too add great value. So thank you for adding that in there. Erica, I'm going to hop back over to you and ask, what would you recommend to agents who are considering accepting a renovation loan as a listing agent, or for those who are those agents who would be submitting an offer as a buyer's agent, since you have the unique experience of being on both sides of the transaction?
Well, I would evaluate what your property is. Like, what is the property fully done, luxury, you can get any buyer you want, and if your seller really needs it out, you may not use that extra period of time. You may just take the highest offer and go. That's just the way the market is going. But if you have a property like the property that I had, where the family really did want, because it was a probate, the family did like the idea of a family moving into the property. They were going to take the best offer with the best terms, but they really did just like the idea. The family had the property for so long, and that they were like the idea of a family or a couple or people who, not just a family, somebody who wanted to live in the house to buy it.
Right. Other than
right. They just wanted the end user to be the purchaser, somebody who wanted to live in the neighborhood, whoever that person was. They were looking for that outcome instead of an investor who was going to, gut it and like make a big bucks or something out of it. And the property again was not going to qualify for, regular financing. So if you're looking to get a higher amount, because people who want to live in a house tend to pay more for it, and you have the time to spare for just a few extra days, I would talk to the lender, make sure that the lender has a good understanding of how to do a renovation loan. If you're working with Camille, you're in great hands, but not everybody that says they know how to do something really does know how to do it and do it well. So I would vet the lender. In all transactions, you call the lender to see how it's going to go and how that relationship is going to work. But in this specific case, you really do need to vet the lender to see if they've done this before, how it's turned out, how they talk about the process, how they talk about their buyers in the process. And then I would really ask the question of if the buyers have already identified their contractor, because that is where delays can happen. If they have not made a decision, if they're wishy-washy, if the contractor is not accessible for a variety of reasons, the contractor may have too many jobs, or the contractor may be out of town, or it could be a lot of things, but it's really hard to get a good contractor. If you need one, talk to Cortland. I'm pointing down because on my screen he's down. You can talk to Cortland, because those are the two key pieces when you're looking at the offer that are different than a traditional offer. You need to make sure that their contractor is set up and that they know what they're doing, they're licensed, they're bonded, because if they're not, then the renovation loan is not going to be approved. And then it could cause a whole lot of other challenges anyway. And then you need to make sure that your lender has done this before, and that they know how to do it successfully. That's for the listing agent side. For the buy side, I'm telling the story about having your contractor because my buyers kept flip-flopping on me during the transaction. Again, this is one I worked on with Camille. They did not, to our chagrin, go with Cortland, even though he was recommended. And, they didn't understand how much not having your contractor in hand could cause a delay. They went with a very low bid. A bid that was significantly lower than everybody else's, which always gives me pause. As a lawyer, also always gives me pause, because those are the cases where people call me and say, well, the contractor demoed and we can't find him.
Right.
Or the contractor was paid 60% of the job, we can't find him, and it's nowhere near complete. So that's, or they come back and keep asking for extras. So it turns out that contractor was not licensed or bonded, so they couldn't get through the renovation process to begin with. So that was a delay. And then we got them, got another contractor in there, and that contractor, it came in what they thought was high, but was really in line with what the industry standard was. But then they had a friend who could do it better. And then that friend had to be vetted. And then the friend came back with a bid. They were like, oh, well, I really can't do it for that price. I'm going to do it for this price, which was really the same price as the contractor that we already have vetted, but they didn't want to go with. So that caused at least a month of delay, at least. Luckily, this was another probate, which is a running theme in my life. And so we had some time on that end. But if that was a regular transaction with a regular standard sale and I was a listing agent, I'd have canceled. I would have the client cancel, because the buyers were all over the place. And these were my buyers, and they were not following the advice. And so if you have a buyer and you're doing a renovation loan, you need to make sure that your buyers have their contractor, that they understand the process. They understand that this is adding a little extra time to the sale that the sellers are graciously giving you in this market, because they don't have to give you that extra time. They can say, I'm taking this offer, we're closing in 10 days. They're giving you the extra time. So you need to be mindful of that, and that you can get kicked out of a transaction for not following suit. And you also need to, again, as the buyer's agent, you need to make sure that you're working with a lender that can do this. So if your clients are looking at any property, which is what buyers are looking at right now, just give me a house, I'll take any house at this point. And then they find a house that needs the work. You may want to have them work on getting the renovation loan, or the thoughts of if that's a possibility for them. You may want to talk to the lender early about working that scenario up and the other scenario. So if you happen to find a house that needs the renovation, that could qualify for the renovation loan, that you're ready to go, that you're not having to then figure out if it's possible and hold, please, let me talk to the lender as you're trying to get your offer accepted. Meanwhile, they're going to accept somebody else's offer. So if your buyers really have the bandwidth to do this, and have the bandwidth, and when I say the bandwidth, it's not the escrow process. The bandwidth comes at the end, when they now have to do the work and they have to get through that process. If they have the bandwidth to do that, and they have the financial capacity to do that, I would say get them pre-approved for both types of loans. Mm-hmm. Really understand what the renovation loan process is, so that you can speak to a listing agent about it, because not every listing agent has seen it. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be able to articulate, this is the process. It doesn't take that much longer. It's not a construction loan process. Mm-hmm. You're going to close escrow. It may be a matter of a few days extra, but you're going to get somebody who wants to live in the house, and that wants to renovate the house, and wants to be in the neighborhood. And that may be a selling point for your seller. So that's a very long-winded answer to the two questions. I hope that it was thorough.
Yes. It did. Yes. No, thank you. Yeah. And I mean, those are all really good points. I actually have a new client that I'm working with who is not quite sure if she wants to find a house that is move-in ready, or if it is going to be a house with a renovation. We're considering adding an ADU. And so in this case, I will have to pre-approval letters for her, because we don't know what we're going to find out there. But it also is really important, to your point, that you do secure that contractor if that's something that you're considering. And then also too, this is something that we've learned along the way in my office in doing these renovations when people are considering adding the ADUs, is that they get their plans in place also with the architect. And for so long, we had been telling them, lead with the contractor, call the contractor. And then we get to the contractor and Cortland says, okay, yes, this is great. But for me to really finalize this bid, I need plans. So what we're telling people now is, look, we really need to start with the architect and getting the plans, because that's going to really be the most effective way for the contractor to be able to provide that feedback and give you a real solid bid. Because he needs to be able to see what the square footage is going to be, what's going to go where, and where these costs are going to, come from. So great. Thank you.
I have a question for you with regard to that
Sure.
For the audience, because I'm sure somebody else has this question as they're watching. When you are getting the bid and getting the architect together, where would you recommend, because people are going to be very specific about, okay, I'm looking at all these properties. When should I call my architect to draw up the plans? Like, I don't have the property yet, but this is my idea of where what I would like to do if I get the property. So where would you recommend in your timeline for them to talk to their architect?
So I think it also comes back to what you were saying about having a lender who is experienced in doing this, because we're going to be the first line of communication when people are discussing that they're considering building an ADU. And then just going back to my experience in projects that have worked and projects that have not worked, and understanding the placement of where that ADU is going to be. So meaning, are we adding on to the garage? Are we converting the garage? What are some of the setback requirements? Are there power lines that could, cause potential problems if we're going up?
Are there easements in the way?
Absolutely. So these are conversations that when clients are coming to me and they're telling me that they're considering buying a property and they want to add on an ADU, and then I have that conversation with them, and then so that they know what to look out for. I'm also having that conversation with the agent so that they understand as they're viewing the properties and they know what to look out for. And then what we're doing is we're telling people that they should line up with a contractor. Like once they get the pre-approval done and we know exactly what we're looking at, now they need to start talking to the contractor so that when they are looking at properties and they're getting very serious to actually putting in an offer on something, that contractor can maybe go and be a part of that conversation so then now you've got another professional there that has the eyes on, so that like in Cortland's situation, he could go and say, okay, this, if you're talking about going up, then you've got these obstacles, or, if you're this close to the fence, or if we've got to put in plumbing here, we've got to scoot this over. So he can really see what the practical part of that property, what the feasibility is of actually building this ADU, because the plans are really coming in where we're running into this issue is when we're talking about building ADUs. And so once, if we are actually like identifying a property, then that's when we immediately go over to the architect and say, okay, look, here's the property, here are some pictures, this is what this looks like, can you put something together for us? There's also going to be cookie cutter plans. There are some that are already pre-approved by the county that are fast-tracked through. So if you get someone, like I have one right now that a client is going to be building an ADU it's with a purchase coupled with buying the house. And we've had all these conversations, and they're going to go with the pre-approved plans because they appreciate that if they start getting into too many variations, it's going to cause delays. So they're fine with just going with the cookie cutter. So in that case, I don't really need an architect. These are already pre-approved plans. But if you have someone who is wanting to deviate from that and they want to do something a little bit more unique, then we need to bring that architect in once they've identified that property, because, you know, the plans are going to be unique to that property. Now, we can still accept an offer. We can open escrow, but everybody has to understand, I mean, this is a stop, drop, and roll. This is a hot potato. Like, we need to move quickly. And when I say quickly, I'm talking about in a matter of days and not weeks. So I hope that answers your question. It needs to happen simultaneously. But it's also at the beginning as we are feeling out what the client is looking for, what their objective is. Because, you know, there's that saying, you don't know what you don't know. So the client doesn't know when to bring in the architect. The client doesn't know when to bring in the contractor. Or how to submit permits and everything. We're coming to the table as the experts and saying, look, we're going to help guide you through this. And we need to be the ones that advise, okay, if this is what your objective is, if you want something a little bit more unique to your property. And then also too, something that we could do, and we've done this before, where we just do a regular sale. Let's say the property doesn't need upgrades. The buyer wants to upgrade the property. So we can do it where we close as a regular transaction, and then we come back and refinance, and there's no delay in that. But honestly, by the time we get all of the rest of the ducks in the row, you're probably looking at 2-3 months down the line anyway. But we can start to get the architect and the contractor and everything in place so that it can be something that is more personalized and on the buyer's timeline, and we're not holding up the seller. So there's that option too. So Cortland, my next question for you is, since, you know, you've addressed what are some of the maintenance repairs that can be done to the property, what are some of the basic upgrades? Now we are going to flip over to more like the beautifying the property. What would you say are some of the basic upgrades that can help improve the appearance of the house, whether it be painted inside, outside, you know, upgrading the kitchens and bath? Like, what would you recommend that you think would add extra value to the property?
Well, obviously, you know, kitchen and baths are number one on most everyone's priority list because of what you talked about in earlier. If we were to reference the Flowers property, you know, it was an older home. It was, you know, Inglewood. All those homes have sort of the same sort of character. And, you know, because of HGTV, all of the, you know, television shows that have inspired everyone, you know, everyone that gets a new home now sort of wants what they've seen on television. So that becomes, the past few years, that's all been about open concepts, knocking down walls, creating open kitchen concepts. Modernizing the bathrooms with, you know, updated tile. We've been doing a lot of floating vanities. So things of that nature. But what I really, I actually encourage people before you even have any of those conversations is to think about their windows. To me, that's a very important upgrade. For beautification, yes, the exterior house looks beautiful, but for the building envelope and maintaining the heat and maintaining the cool, though the windows are very, very important because you don't really realize how thin a lot of the windows are, how much heat loss you have with the windows, how much air is coming in the windows, and how much your HVAC system has to work harder because of the inefficiency of the windows. And so I really encourage a lot of my clients now to really look at the windows as sort of, because it's a pretty big ticket item, but it's one of those items that I really think will give you a good bang for your buck. I also speak to clients about solar panels. I think solar panels are a good additive, and the industry has changed a bit. So there's not so much of those leasing, funny money kind of scenarios going on. It's pretty straightforward. And, again, when you're going to increase the mechanicals in terms of increasing to 200 amp panels, you're going to increase, your HVAC capacity. You've got more electronics in the home, then the solar panels help with offsetting the bills that are going to be associated with that increased electric drain. So for me, windows are very important. I encourage electric panels, solar panels, and then, like I said, the kitchen and the baths are pretty much, par for the course. But for us, what's been helpful is to allow the homeowners, or to make it a collaborative process. And what I mean by that is to have the homeowners engaged in the selection of the finishes. In terms of what type of faucet are you interested in? If we're going to put tile, what type of tile are you interested in? And it ensures that we are in alignment with what their expectations are. Because if they tell us, hey, renovate the kitchen, renovate the bathroom, and we don't really have a conversation about that design, then, the expectations won't necessarily be matched or met. I've also been encouraging people, because of HGTV and all of these other things, we've actually incorporated into our company a designer, and it's been invaluable because now we have someone who that is what they do as a professional, as opposed to leaning on me as a contractor to give you what I've experienced in someone else's home to give you a suggestion as to what you should do in your home. And I like staying in my lane. And sometimes it works out, but the other part, it really doesn't, because if you choose the paint color that the homeowner isn't really in love with, now, how do you sort out repainting? Are we responsible for repainting because you didn't like the color? So where I'm at now is Erica, the lawyers, for me, it's all about checkoffs and signatures. This is the color, initial. This is the light fixture and the location, initial, because someone can come in and say, oh, I want the light here now. It's not a problem, but you did initial that you wanted it there. So it's just those things. And then with homeowners, what happens with construction is as a home, or as any person sees the home coming together, then, you start seeing things that you didn't see in the beginning. So now it's like, oh, I want this and I want to get that. And can I incorporate this? And totally not a problem. Just know that those just are associated, unfortunately, with a thing called a change order.
Right.
And we don't have, it's not as if we're going to underbid and then change order you up. It's just that once we get to the finishes, everyone sort of, the personalities and the desires really start to manifest themselves. And now everyone's like a Home Depot, HGD. Oh, I want this type of faucet. I want this type of vanity. I want this type of sink. Okay, no problem. So it's just about that.
It's about setting expectations. Yeah,
totally. And to that point, I would really encourage that to happen in the beginning, because the challenge is we've done all of the construction and now we're at the end, and now we're trying to decide what type of light fixture or what type of faucet fixture. And that actually became a big issue in the last 6 months because of the supply chain issue. You making a decision at the end, and now we can't get this for another 3-4 weeks. 2 months.
3-4 weeks
is easy.
Well, yeah, I mean,
3 or 4 months.
I'm minimizing it.
Oh,
2-3
no,
months.
don't minimize it.
Right.
Let these people understand the ramifications of delayed decisions. And that's ramifications, delays in deciding which house you want to purchase, deciding when to lock in your rate, deciding what material you want to use. I always, when I talk to contractors and I listen to contractors, I think of Sleepless in Seattle, because he was an architect and they went in and the lady kept changing her cabinets and they're like, please stop. We'll never end this job. We're going to be working on this job. It's work.
And as a contractor, you don't want, people, don't have an endless budget. So, it's like, hey, we have to rein in these decisions. We have to rein in these changes, because you're going to exhaust your budget trying to get this exact perfection. And so a lot of times I'll tell clients, I'll say, hey, well, look, I think we got a good sense of where we're at. There are going to be some things here in this home that you may not get everything, but look at it this way. There's always a step-up home. So in that step-up home, all of the things you thought you didn't get here, you've already kind of gone through that process. Archive that in your mind. And then when we get to the step-up home, now we can incorporate some of those things that may have gotten away from us in this initial home. And I think people tend to feel a little bit better about that, because I think when you bought a home, it's a big purchase. A lot of times it's the biggest purchase, and they want everything in that home, which I understand. But I think you have to request what's within reason. And I think that's where our help comes in, where we can navigate them towards a space of what's within reason.
Right. Well, I just jotted down a note to incorporate as a part of our process into recommending that people create a Pinterest board, or even if it's a dream board, if you will, and they see, like, I don't know if people are still getting magazines, but if you are, just pull some things out. And so then that will help for you, not only just for you personally, but also with the designer, sitting down to really get an idea of their taste and what they're looking for. And then, as we know, everything, what they see in the magazines or what they see on Pinterest is going to most likely be at the higher level. But then you can, recommend some alternatives that fit within their budget. Well, I want to thank you both. I always learn something new when I speak to you both, so I appreciate it. I get educated. Erica, thank you for interjecting that part about the architect, because that will now go as a part of my plan. Okay, when do we need to make sure that we bring that architect in? And, just really having an understanding of what are some of the important, upgrades that can be done to the home that aren't necessarily beautification, but that are also system involved. So thank you. I hope that everybody found this information helpful. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. And at the end of this video, you will be able to see the contact information for our lovely guest speakers today. So again, this is Camille Sams, your Zen Lender, and thank you for joining the Kitchen Table Talk. Have a great one.